Hi, and welcome to That's What She Said, the podcast where Gen X and older women share their insights, their stories, and those hard earned wisdoms that can help Gen Z plus women navigate life, work, and everything in between. We talk about the stuff no one else tells you: success, setbacks, pleasure, power, and everything out there. So you can own your choices and create a life on your own terms. So let's dive in. Have you ever felt like the world is quietly telling you what's possible for you, what career you should have, what stories you should tell, or even when it's too late to start something new? That pressure can feel intense, especially for young women trying to find their own creative voice. Caytha Jentis knows that feeling well. She started out as a literary agent and went to write and produce films, web series, and plays that challenge the traditional narratives about women, motherhood, and midlife. Along the way, Caytha encountered ageism, rejection, and countless closed doors, but she kept creating, kept trusting her instincts, and found new ways to tell stories that matter. In her 60s, Caytha took up aerial arts, which I just love so much, performing circus shows and producing a hybrid aerial stage play. That leap wasn't just physical, it was symbolic of a career and life lived on her own terms. Keitha's story shows that taking risks, reinventing yourself, and challenging societal expectations aren't just possible, they can be the keys to a life of creativity, impact, and fulfillment. For any young woman trying to carve her path, Keitha's journey is proof that it's never too late to start or to pivot or to create the work you were meant to do. So if you're struggling with that, this episode's for you. Keitha, thank you so much for joining me.
Well, thank you for having me, Robin.
Absolutely. I wanted to start by asking, you've reinvented your career multiple times and you've taken huge creative risks, even challenging the rules that society sets for women, especially around age and visibility. So, for the young women listening and they're just starting out or just figuring out what's possible in their lives, what's the first thing you want them to know about trusting themselves and going after what they really want?
I feel like I've been in evolution more than true pivoting stuff. But I mean, I think you don't want to ever have regrets is my
Mm.
main thing. And somebody who's worked a lot in sales, I mean, it's basically what you do in all aspects of life. It's self rejection. So sometimes it's better, like if you don't try or you don't do. To me, it's a no until it's a yes. And if you don't go after something, you've created the no. And that's where, yes, going out after things and doing things that you may fail at or maybe a closed door, but you don't know until you try to go through it, is basically, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, it absolutely does. I want to get back to something you said right from the start. And I remember that in our initial
Yeah.
conversation offline, you made a distinction between evolution and the word I used, which was reinvention. Can you explain that a little bit to me?
Well, I was just saying I haven't really made pivots. I just think I've made I guess the umbrella bigger, you know? I feel like I've always been somebody who likes to be a storyteller. So I started my career in sales and it happened to be in the movie business, but I also worked selling other products because to me, sales is storytelling. Like I started as a writer. I'm like, okay, I'm not going to make a living as a writer when I was younger. But to me, sales is storytelling. You have a product, you have to tell a story that makes somebody want it. And also, if you're an entrepreneur or anything, it's knowing that there's an audience for whatever you're selling. So it's important, one, to know how to articulate and get somebody excited by whatever it is, that you're, trying to sell or, if it's writing the story you want. And then it's also knowing who's going to care, who's the audience, and how do I connect with them. And to me, that formula applies to many different careers. And when I've spoken once in a film school, the person who is the professor jumped in and asked me a question about my career. And I'm like, wait, before I even answer this question, I want to know who's in this class. I don't want to just be here bragging about what I've done or, whatever it is. So I went around to the students and I said, I want to know why you chose this screenwriting class. And I think it's important for you to learn to self advocate. So I want to go around and then when they each told me the reason, then I knew a little bit of who they are, so that way when I had the question, I could think of it, how is it going to help these people who are there as opposed to me just assume this, blanket of students cared about everything I said. And then I could sort of tailor it. And I also wanted these students who, were 18, 19, 20 to feel comfortable advocating for themselves and pitching themselves, like who, not in like, in a selling space, but
Mhm.
tell me why you signed up. What do you have goals of what you want to do after college? What is your major and things that help define us, especially at that age. And I'm like, I want you to be able to do that and tell each buddy in this class and tell me to help you learn how to self advocate.
Mm. So, in those moments when you've been able to connect with younger women, do you have any thoughts about what they're trying to figure out, either creatively or professionally, in in that they're holding themselves back? Where are they getting in their own way, do you think?
I think, especially when you're younger, you're really worried about what other people think. And I
Mm,
think that is particularly maybe true with women professionally. And also, women are afraid to do something, let's say for a job in an interview, which with skills that they don't have yet, then they're just like, oh, I can't do this job. Where men are, where studies found, oh, they're more likely to say yes, and then I'll figure it out on the job. And that's where
yeah.
I feel like I've been that person against kind of the norm. Actually, there was a young woman who was a graduate in college. My play was having an off Broadway production, and we needed somebody to do with marketing. And she was a screenwriting major, and I had mentored her. And she was looking for work, and I'm like, "Look, they're looking for somebody to do social media marketing, and I feel like again, if you want to be a writer, this is a way that you can write, and I think that's what's important is finding things that are indirectly your skills versus directly. And I said, this I think is a great way. She goes, oh, because you have to do writing because you're going to do their social media and marketing. And I said, do you know how to use Canva? And she's like, no. I go, well, when you talk to them, say you know how to use Canva.
Right.
And then she learned it over the weekend and she, got the job. And, it was great in terms of her. And that's where I would say also is I think it's really important when you go into an interview for whatever it is, you can't say, "Oh, I'll do anything." And, because
Right.
nobody wants to know that. Like they want to know what you want to do. And then again, I think the key is to figure out how what you want to do, you can convince them what they want you to do. But I think it's really important to know what you want, first of all, and then also realize that there is pivoting and that it shouldn't be quite so linear per se or so narrow what it is. Because I think it's breaking down, okay, are you a people person? Are you a salesperson? Are you an analytical person? Like, I think that are general things. And then you can figure out how you can use these skills that you have to do basically anything. And it's important to try the other categories, which you may feel isn't your comfort zone.
I think that idea that you're capturing is trusting yourself to know who you are, which way you lean, and then how you can use that aspect of who you genuinely or authentically are to branch out, as you said, to other areas, to push beyond the things that are well within your wheelhouse
Yeah.
and just go from that. And I laughed earlier when you were talking about the gender differences. And it does still hold up according to research that women will hold themselves back until they know 95% of the things that are necessary in a job. And
Yeah.
men, I think the percentage is like 10 or
Yeah.
15%. And my nephew, who I adore, is 21, and he and my sister and my niece were having a conversation one day, and my sister and niece said, "Someday I'd love to learn how to fly a plane." And my nephew, with all his 21-year-old bravado, said, "Oh, I could probably just get in a plane and figure it out."
Yeah.
And they looked at him like he was insane. They're like, "You can't just get in a plane." He's like, "No, I'm pretty sure I could." And it was such a clear story about, wow, the 2 women, my sister and my niece were like, "Yeah, I wanna learn, I wanna go to class, I wanna build all the skills," and he's like, "Ah, literally, I'll wing it." Here
I've
he is.
been somewhat of not in I wouldn't be jumping in a plane flying it, but I'm kind of a wing it, kind of figure it out on the job
Really?
person, which I know, like, again, I've always sort of been that way. But I also wanna say, I do think it takes a while to
Mm,
find your voice and figure out who you are. And I think a lot of time young people, and I did that as well, you sort of mimic other people that you admire to be more like them. And I do think it's recognizing that it takes time to figure out who you are. And that's like, again, back to that classroom. There was one person goes, "Oh yeah, no, I'm like an undecided major. I don't know what I want to do." And I go, "You know what? That's totally 100% acceptable. Not everybody is expected to go to college with a path of what they want to do and what they want to major in." And I go, "That's part of why you're there. So do not feel like that's wrong. Like that is the exact thing you're supposed to do is you're supposed to be open-minded." And I think that when you go into a job interview, they want to see passion. And that's kind of another thing. If you're so passionate, let's say about philosophy, and
mm.
you're excited and you can speak to that, and then just say, okay, I know this is a job that isn't that like, but I can learn that because I can be passionate about that too. Where I think sometimes people feel like, oh, I have to be the accounting major, and that's like so boring. And then you go in there, what was your major? Accounting. I think it's just showing that this ability to learn and to be open to new things. I also think failure and rejection is always how you learn. You're going to get a lot of rejection, whether it's in a social life or in a professional life, and you may cry, and crying is okay. It's just then you have to wipe the tears away and try again. And what can you learn from it to be better? And also, failure sometimes can have you open a different door. Like, it's not like, "Oh, I'm gonna keep trying this one thing and try to get through it." And sometimes when you can't get through it, and that's what I would say a little bit to kind of my pivoting stuff, it's sometimes another door opens. But I think it's sometimes hitting, the closed door to that'll get you to that next door, which is something very different.
So you're talking about growth through rejection or
Yeah.
failure. Would
Yeah.
you also say that both of those play a role in developing and finding your voice, especially as a
Oh,
woman?
absolutely. When I do something well, I have no idea what I've done sometimes. It's when I do it wrong that I learn how to do it right. And that's why sometimes I'm like, I can't be a good teacher because some things are just instinct and I do it. But
Mhm.
like what I do, like somebody then corrects me, I'm like, oh, that's how you do it better. But it takes doing it wrong to learn how to do it
Mm.
right.
I love that point, and the challenge I have with it is that in my observation, women are taught, whether it's socially or culturally, to play it safe,
Right.
especially around creativity. And I'm curious what your thoughts are on that and what that cost might be to women over time.
I mean, I think that's a very complicated question in many ways. I mean, there's some things that do exist, which, to sexism or whatever, that women have to learn how to navigate that. I mean, there's going to be times that society holds you back for things that are not your fault, like unconscious and conscious bias does exist.
Right.
But I just think it's learning to not hold yourself back in the same. And also, like, I'm doing this aerial, and I don't think of myself as a fearless person. I just feel like I live in the safe space. Not that it's controlling, because I'm not like a super controlling person, but if I feel in control, I feel safe. And I think it's finding that way when you're doing things that might feel unsafe.
Mm.
How do you feel like you still have control?
Does within your industry, speaking of safety,
Yeah.
you've talked about ageism, you just mentioned sexism. Maybe talk to how did you develop that sense of control regarding especially these external barriers in order for you to move forward and not be held back either by outside forces or hold yourself back because in that moment the outside forces were too strong?
I mean, I just think that's who I am. I mean, I think you can develop that, but, and like I said, like the getting in and flying a plane with just figuring out as we go or jumping out of a plane, like, I would never do that because I feel like I have no control over that. I think it's a very personal thing. I just think that's how I am innately, which I sort of said at the beginning, would I regret doing something or regret not doing something? And especially when I'm like, feel like I'm at the end of my life where it would be like, "Oh, will I be like, oh god, I never should have done that?' Or would I be, I wish I'd done that?" I think it's usually typically things you didn't do. And again, I think lots of times when I've faced struggles and you just wanna give up on something, I just
Mhm.
feel like I look at it going, "Well, nobody else is gonna care if I give up, but I'm gonna care." And it's like making my first film, I would say, every morning, I'm like, "Okay, I'm gonna move a mountain today." And I just would say, "I'm gonna move a mountain, and if I give up on moving the mountain, nobody's gonna care." So, it's for me, like, I'm the one that has to keep pushing my goal forward, a goal, because I think that's where I think you have to that whole vulnerability and all that other stuff, I think you just have to set these goals, but not rigidly, and because I happen to be goal oriented, so that's just for me specifically.
Was there ever a time that other people's narrative, whether it was about being a woman, being of a certain age, did it ever get into your mindset? And if so, how did you work through that? Because I think that's such a huge challenge for women to learn specific ways to push back the voices that are not theirs, but often hinder them.
Well, I mean, it I've never really let gender or age stop me, but
Mhm.
there was a time in the movie business, and especially I was working on this project about women turning 50, and I felt like I
The other
kept
F word, right?
the other F word, and I kept hearing, like, I started, like, buying into this sort of narrative that existed. Basically, if older people don't stop or step aside, they're denying younger people
Mhm.
opportunities. I sort of felt that I was being selfish by trying to pursue these, like, ambitious goals later in life that I'm taking the spot, which is again what women feel is like, there's one spot for women. So they are like fighting with each other. But I felt like, oh, there was this feeling that, oh, if we got out of the workforce, it was this feeling for a moment that I felt like in the movie business, it was like my getting a job in the writer's room was denying a younger person a job. Why would I want to take that spot? A little bit. But I'm just saying, that was like the only time I kind of had these little, like, playing with my head that
Mhm.
basically older people trying to break into the movie business, that there was a little bit of feeling I was taking a spot that a younger person who's earlier in their career could have had or something like that. But I don't know, it's weird. I grew up in the 70s, which was a pretty androgynous time. I mean, which term doesn't even play anymore. But I felt like I didn't have a lot of gender roles in my community growing up. So I felt like in my formative years, that wasn't something I mean, I learned that later in college and, older that gender can hold you back, but I feel like in my younger years and I was always sort of a tomboy and always played sports, so I knew that kind of that world, but I never felt that these things would hold me back, and then especially doing this aerial now where I was like, I just did it, and started doing it, and then I realized, oh, you can get stronger with age, you can get flexible with age, which is you wouldn't expect, but you just sort of discover, and the other thing is too, you gotta work with what you have, and that's to especially younger generations that live so much in a social media world where you're constantly looking at other people. It's being comfortable in your own skin and knowing what your own secret powers and what you can do because like in this aerial I'm have zero dance background. I'm never going to be the ballerina in the sky, and so I just lean into other things that work for me in this space, and that's again, in an artist space. And that's where, especially like, okay, horror can be a popular genre. I'm never going to write a horror film. I mean, and I think it's kind of to the gypsy thing about having a gimmick and also knowing what your secret power, your special power is, and honing that. And we all have something that makes us unique and special, or many things. And I think it's just leaning into that as opposed to looking at these other people
Mm.
and trying to be more like them, or having this sort of shame that you're not.
How did you figure out what was your special thing, your unique special sauce?
I don't know. I don't know. I just think you just lean in. I don't know how I would say like that there was an aha moment. I just feel like I kind of have an innate sense of what I'm good at, and
Mhm.
just go that way. I mean, I don't want to list it in a braggy way. It's just figuring that out. And of course, there's so many times when I'm like, oh, I wish I could do that. And I wish I could be, I mean, whatever the world is, where we all do have envy. It's hard not to, but it's not letting it take over.
So, when you're making those kind of choices, like, let's just use Ariel as an example. I
Yeah.
mean, that is not typically something that I think most people, certainly in my 50s, that is not something I've ever considered doing. But what drew you to do something that is not typically aligned with women who are over age 50?
It started because when I was in my 50s and I did that project, The Other F Word, I started having a lot of younger friends, which was the weirdest thing. I started having all these millennial friends, and I was sort of like, oh, I took like whatever the time off to raise my kids,
Mhm.
um, where I worked, but it wasn't like I was so hyper focused the way you are once you're an empty nester. And I was like, "Oh, okay, so I'm professionally at their level, these mid-career people." And I got to the point, realized that especially younger generations didn't see older generations the way
Mhm.
we did to our parents' generation, that there was more fluidity. And then I was like, "Oh, okay, well, if we have similar passions, then this sort of age and gender can go away. If, you're connecting with what are we excited about, whether it's pickleball or whether it's the opera, whatever, and for me, Ariel. But it was things that I just was drawn to. I just did. And I wrote this essay about dancing at the House of Yes. And I would go there with my friends. And I just always said, if we think we belong, then we do belong, when we would go to these clubs and dance. And I was like, also, everybody's in their own head anyway. They're not really looking at us and judging us. And that's where I was like, if we think we belong, then we belong. To all of this stuff, I think what the answer is, it's like trusting your gut or following these things that pull you, these energy pulls. Where I had did the flying trapeze in Club Med when I won a sales incentive in my 40s. And I was like, oh, this is fun. And I did want to run away to join the circus in my 40s. But there was not a lot available. And I was a mom. And I was like, oh, how do I keep doing this? This is fun. And so then I had been at the show at this place in Bushwick, and I'd seen a lot of these aerialists, not the Cirque du Soleil, more the downtown New York scene, performance art type of aerial that was sort of in that queer culture space. And I was like, oh yeah, I like this. I want to be part of this world. So and I think I told you, I mean, I did art modeling in my 50s, and I went to
I
this
did not know
art.
that about you.
Hmm? What?
I did not know that about you.
Oh, well, it kind of like it was like, and sort of to me, I always used to say, do it for the story. So that kind of lives into this whole space of storytelling and experiences, where I was like, bad day can make the best story, or the most humiliating experience will make a great story. So it was like, just do everything for the story. And so first boss was on the board of an art graduate program. And he's like, oh, let me give you a tour of the school. So I was walking around and I saw this woman, nude modeling, art modeling for a bunch of students. And for some reason, I was like, oh, I want to do that. I want to just be the nude model, the art model. So I said to him, can I do that? And he's like, Like, he kind of blushed. He's like, "What? I wanna just do that once." Like, I didn't wanna make a thing out of it. And he was like, "If you're serious." I go, "Yeah." So there was these graduate students that weekly would sketch with each other, art models. And I just wanted to do it because I thought for like, again, back to like the thrill of it, because I could control it. But I was like, wow, this would be really wild. And I think it was something I wouldn't have done in my 20s or my 30s. But in my 50s, I was like, yeah, I would take my clothes off and let people sketch me because to them, they're not judging my body as a body. They're seeing me as a piece of art.
Right.
So it doesn't matter my body type. They're looking at the pieces. And so if I allow my ego to get in the way, I'm doing a disservice to the experience because they're not going to be judging me. They're just going to be sketching me. They're not going to be looking at me and going, oh, whatever. And I also knew I would write an essay about it because I was like, "Oh, this will be a fun thing." Get my essay and also, like, I went to this sex party, which was this very weird thing because I knew I would write about it, and I always write from a humor space, so it's written, like, literally in my head, sort of holding this pose, listening to the kids talk, and having, like, thoughts about what they're talking about, and having this whole, "Wait, do I have the power? Do they have the power?" So that's why when I did the aerial with the first class where I found it, because there's millions of studios all over the place now. When I did it in my 40s, aerial wasn't as popular.
Mhm.
And I just was like, "Oh, I know I'm gonna write an essay about this." So I went in there and I said to the guy, I go, "I'm probably gonna be the oldest person in this class." And he said, "I doubt it. Like, we have like, nobody cares about that." And it was kind of funny because I was like 60 or so. "Oh, I think there are even like 60-year-olds doing this. Don't worry. Like, nobody cares." I'm like, "Okay." I was like, "Oh, okay." And for me, like, the challenges of it was like, again, I don't have a dance background. It's really aerial dance, and I'm not a dancer. And spinning, I don't have very good spin tolerance. And so there were so many things that held me back, which wasn't age.
Right.
And, but I had strength and there was something about it because it is a very creative thing. It's a very creative experience because it is a form of dance.
Mhm.
And similar to when I was art modeling, where I was like, oh, I don't think I ever could draw. I could be part of art by being the subject. And that's what was really cool to me. I'm like, I can't draw, but I could be the subject. And now I'm part of art, fine art. And then that's where with this, I was like, okay, can I? And that was my thesis statement to myself, what keeps me going. As in my early 60s, can I become more of a dancer as somebody who was a jock? And that's where when you're talking about that reinvention or pivoting, I'm like, I've never used my body this way. When I first started taking classes, like I would just like put my hand out like this. And my friend's like, it's not a thumbs up. You're supposed to go like that. Like, oh, I don't even know. Like, this is not even pointing my toes. I just would shoot my arms out. And so it's been this fun thing. And then to become more flexible, like, was probably a foot away from a Barbie split, and now I'm, like, an inch away. To me, that, like, it blows my mind a little bit because it seems not what you think when you get older, that you
Mhm.
be stronger, be more flexible, and I do think even though I'm doing something which if you could see the bruises on my body, there's things that are gonna be helpful as I do get older because breaking hips and falling down is something that definitely affects older people,
Mhm.
leads to their death. And I'm not that I'm not going to fall down because we do fall down, but I feel like I'm working on my body that it could be better older body.
I would agree. I had a physician on a few weeks ago, and that was one of her big points was as younger women or whatever age, you start preparing for the body you want in the
Mhm.
future, the health that you want in the future. I think that's what you're talking about. That, yeah, we might fall. There might be things that might be a little more difficult, but getting the body as prepared as possible to manage some of the challenges that come with getting older.
And I think that applies to childbirth too. Because again, I was very athletic always. And I felt like, oh, the athlete in me is gonna get me through childbirth, because I feel like I had that sort of physical strength. And then once
Mhm.
I had a baby and had a really long labor, I was like, "Okay, you survived labor, you can run a marathon." Like, that was my mantra when I had to do scary things. Like, the
Mhm.
first time I did the flying trapeze, the scary part for me was climbing up to the stand, because once you're at the stand, they put you in, and I was doing crazy stuff, but you're hoisted in. Climbing up the stairs 3 stories up, I'm like, "You survived childbirth, you survived childbirth, you survived." And then it was like when I ran a marathon, I'm like, "Okay, your pushing was 3.5 hours." So I do think you trick yourself with these little mantras to get through hard things, so
You've talked a lot about things too that not only prepare your body, but your your way of perceiving the world, perceiving yourself, being open-minded. We talk about the aerial, you talk about some of the flexibility in your creativity, you talked about being the art model, and you skimmed over real quickly, Caytha, that you went to a sex party.
Oh, yeah.
And and
Happy to talk about that.
we might as well circle around. But my experience with things like this and even events that are related to sex and sexuality, my biggest takeaway is how open-minded these communities are, whether it's nudist resorts or a kink conference that my husband and I wandered into one day not many years ago, is I have never felt so in a really good way, invisible, and what I mean by that is nobody judged. When we were at that conference and literally we were there to do work and saw all these interestingly dressed people, and I'm like, "We gotta go, like, I'm just curious." And we are in our vacation shorts
Yeah.
and shirts and definitely stood out, and not one person looked at us like, "What are they doing here?" "Why don't they belong?" And that's one of my biggest takeaways, and as I'm listening to your stories, that sounds really similar. So what have been your experiences in those environments and maybe going back to
Well,
the
yeah,
one you
well, so
skimmed
that
over?
to that party, but and actually, because again, as a writer, I was always fascinated by power dynamics. So when you talked about the king thing, so I did all the because I was very fascinated by, not in a personal way, in an intellectual way, of the
Mhm.
whole power exchange, uh,
Yes.
which is what BDSM is. And
Mhm.
I was very fascinated by who has the power and who doesn't, and how power is used. This one dominatrix who pivoted into self-help business, and I went to her conference, out of curiosity because it was written up in the New York Times, and she was showing giveaway power all the time. And so her whole thing is how you keep the power. And it's
Yeah.
real. I mean, again, I can't she'd be a great guest, because it was these subtle ways that, because it is always like, wow, how did, because there is, I think, a fascination. How can I be a
Yeah.
dominatrix and get men to do whatever I want them to do? Because the thing is, like, the dominatrix experience is actually legal. Like, in New York, it's legal. It's not illegal because there's no sex exchange. It's just
Right.
power. And it may, I mean, lead to it, but it's not about sex, it's about power,
Yeah.
at least in that space. And these men who like to be humiliated and be shamed, or being bossed around, which is a whole fascinating thing. But
Mhm.
anyway, to this party, what exactly what you're saying. So a producer who came to New York was, we were supposed to meet, and he was being it's a whole long-ish story of how he came about doing it. And I go, "Could we switch the meeting to 4?" And he's like, "No, I can't, because I was doing this pole dancing class," which is a whole 'nother gateway. And
Of course you were, Keitha.
well, it was because, like, that was my husband. I was like, "Oh, if I can't tell this TV show, I'm so frustrated in the movie business, I'm just gonna become a pole dancer." And my husband in the car was like, "Keitha, you have a great body for a woman your age, but that ship has sailed." And I was like, okay, one, I wasn't really serious. So then I was like indignant, going, well, I can't really do my
And now you're pissed me off.
I was like, how dare you say you can't be a pole dancer,
Good for you.
And then I was like, well, I better take a class. So, um, which is a whole funny story in itself. But this guy, producer, I was like, oh, I didn't want to tell him why I had to switch the time. And he didn't want to tell me why his. He goes, okay, I'm going to this sex party. And I go, "Oh, can I come?" I go, "I just wanna come to observe it," And he's like, "Well, let me find out." So, the thing about it was, 'cause again, I knew I would write about this. And again, I was like, how do you not be a fly on the wall? And that's again how I am, like, to the story. This is gonna be a great story about going to this sex party, knowing it was understood that you could just be a watcher, a
Mhm.
voyeur. So that was to your point, when we're going it was in the garment district in New York City, in the most unassuming, like, thing that they could be have sewing machines or a sex party. It wasn't anything glamorous or exciting, and it was, like,
Mhm.
5 o'clock on a weekday in the summer, so it was still bright out, and I'm going up the stairs similar going, "You have to act like you belong here. You have to belong here. If you get awkward, then it's gonna be
Yeah.
very unusual." But then to my personality, we walk in there and the woman, greets us, and it was this one room, which was the hangout room, and because "Oh, you're new," gives me this tour, and then there's the one room with all these mattresses on the floor. It's literally an office space that probably was rented for the day. Mattresses on the floor, and then the room that had lemonade, because I think it's supposed to be you can't have alcohol. I'm just laughing. I'm in this room and I'm like, it could be a church social or it could be a sex party because we're all drinking lemonade. And I'm like, and then I'm just chatting people up. Oh, what brings you here? Like, "Oh, what do you do when you're not here?" And I'm just chatting everybody up. And then the guy, he's ready, like, "Let's go in the other room." And I'm just sitting there and, like, looking at everybody going, it was kind of like a zoo experience in many ways. I'm just watching instead of watching animals, like, hump each other, I'm watching people hump each other. And because there was nothing sexy about the whole thing. It wasn't I'm just chatting up the people next to me.
Oh
"Oh,
my god,
oh."
Caytha.
And I got some really funny stories, and so, anyway, and then I left. So that was my sex party, and when I did write around it, it was just written with humor
Right,
and silliness versus any sort of thing that was
right.
any seductive or
Yeah, it wasn't written from a taboo or
erotic. It wasn't erotic.
closeted approach. It just was, oh my goodness. Kate, I feel like I could be talking to you for hours with some of your stories. And before I wrap up with a couple of rapid fire questions, I did want to ask you
Yeah,
if there's a young woman who is listening right now and she's sitting there thinking, I've got this idea or this version of my life that I want, but I'm scared to go for it. What would you tell her?
don't be scared. Just, I mean, go for it. What would you lose if you go for it?
Good one.
What is, in the pros and the cons, what are the cons?
So to wrap up, what's your go to Power Woman song, Keitha?
I would say to this, I used to listen to that chub thumping whatever, I get knocked down, but I get up
Oh,
again.
yeah, yeah. Tub thumping. Yep.
Yeah, chub thumping.
I love it.
I would play that. I get knocked down, I get up
Oh,
again.
that's a great one. What's one life hack or tip that you use?
Okay, so I don't think I have a life hack, except I would say I make my bed every morning because
Oh, that's a great one.
I'm like, "That bed has to be made."
That's a great one. There's actually some research that shows that doing that, making your bed, one of the first things in your morning is a fundamental part of productivity and just feeling satisfied with life. So no, you're right on track with that. Okay, what's one of your favorite books?
My favorite books was The Pavilion of Women,
Hmm.
written by Pearl Buck, that I read while I was a mother, and it was really this empowering about this woman. It's hard to explain what it was about it, but was this woman in the old China, and this woman ran the house and had control over everything. And when she got to a certain age, she said to your husband, you could get a concubine because back then there was no birth control. And he allowed him to have this concubine. It was just how she had incredible control over her home. I mean, she ends up having an emotional affair with a minister, this woman who had control over her domain.
Mm,
At that time, especially, felt like I didn't have the control, and I admired her so much. So that's why I would say of all the books I've read, that one just stuck with me.
all right. That's going to be added to my list now. What's one belief you've had to unlearn?
That I don't have to take care of everybody.
Mm. Huh,
Really big one.
And then my last one is, what's something you're looking forward to?
I guess I'm looking forward to my next aerial performance would be whatever it is, because I have learned that it's fun to perform. So I guess that's the thing I'm looking forward to is my next performance, which is
Excellent.
part
I
of
hope
the
you.
show where all the aerialists are over 50. So it's kind of cool that.
Caytha, I can't thank you enough. I just so appreciate that you were so open to offering your experiences to the women who are building their lives and building this world. I'm going to make sure to add details about your life and your projects in the show notes for all the listeners to follow your work. And to all of you, take what you heard today, carry what matters, and pass that wisdom forward. Because when women speak, the world changes. Thanks for listening and see you next time on That's What She Said. Follow That's What She Said on social media on Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube. That's What She Said is created, hosted, and executive produced by Dr. Robin Buckley. Our Senior VP of Productions and Content Strategy Consultant is Dr. Tom Grabowski. Jordan Gilbert is our show's Marketing and Creative Content Specialist. Senior Producer is Quentin Sukup. And remember to keep the conversation going. Subscribe wherever you get your podcasts, whether you're a woman who's lived it or a woman who's building it.